Alright, hello everyone and welcome back to Adventures Elsewhere Reviews, the spoiler-free book review show. I am your host Jay Black, and yes, I have had 7 inches cut off my hair. I am here today with an early contender for Book of the Year. This is The Curse of Six by Mark T. Bates. This is an adult psychological horror. Goodreads says it is 100 pages. This is indie press, it's RDG Books Press, and I read the ebook for this one. At this point in the episode, I like to do my overall impression of the book in 3 words. This is probably the easiest one I've had thus far. This one, I would say, is emotional. It's sort of folksy and heartfelt. Slightly weird combination of things for a horror novel, but let's get into this, shall we? Let's start as we always do with characters. This is a very, very character-driven, character-heavy story. Our main POV character is Stevie. He is a young man, he's like 20-odd, I think, maybe even slightly younger than that. And, he's in many ways sort of fairly typical, struggling to find his place in the world type young man. He also has his troubles, and it's sort of in many ways about his life growing up with the sort of troubles that he's had to deal with, single parent family, and living, it seems like it's not really stated, I don't think, but you get the impression that it's in quite an isolated area. He's quite an isolated person because of the troubles he faces. Also, he's naturally sort of, it seems, quite shy, quite quiet, and there's a lot of that, but the main source of his troubles is the Grey Witch. And the Grey Witch doesn't get a ton of page time, but her presence looms extremely heavy over just about everything in this book. And she's just, as you might imagine, creepy older woman, sort of this phantom-like presence. It's one of those where Stevie is quite clearly the only person that can see her, or is he? Because she just so happens to not really be around when anyone else is. So is she there, is she not? Who knows? There aren't that many other characters, this being a 100-page book, and the sort of pacing and structure that it has, I'll get onto that a bit later. But there's also Yasmin, briefly, who's this sort of kindly, sort of hippie-ish almost woman, a bit of a, she reads palms, that sort of type of person, sort of fortune teller-ish, but not in a sinister way. She's quite kindly, just a bit eccentric, I guess is maybe the word. And you also have Stevie's mother, who I don't believe is named, and she's very guarded. She almost can come across a bit of a blank slate, but then when the curtain's peeled back a little bit, you realise, no, she's just very guarded and has a lot of her own troubles and traumas as well. Which brings us on quite nicely to the writing quality in this book, which is just excellent, honestly. Like, this book is, it just flows so nicely. It really does. It's one of those where you've just suddenly read 20 pages. It's really nicely, like, the craftsmanship of it is just really nice. And it's quite a skill, I think, to make a book like this quite that easy to sort of get through and quite that easy to read, because it does tackle some really difficult subject matter. So being able to do that, and also make it that sort of smooth, flowing, easy read, I think is a real testament to the writer's skill on this one. And there are just a lot of very clever choices in this book, because you have this sort of structure where your main character Stevie is doing a lot of looking back over his life. So the choice of using first-person past to do that is very, very clever. It's not something I would think of as a writer and go, oh yeah, first past for horror, of course. But it just works so well here, and there are a lot of very clever choices in that sort of vein. And this sort of segues quite nicely into the pacing. The pacing of this book is really, really good, because it's sort of interesting in the sense of, it's a short book, it's 100 pages, and it feels short, but it also takes its time. It uses its space very, very well and very cleverly. It feels short, sure, but it doesn't feel that short. Like, you have this ebb and flow to the story. Like, the first portions go quite quickly, and then it sort of slows down. And the way that's handled, given we know what's happening in the present as he's looking back over his life, again, it's very clever because it's very sort of naturalistic with how you'd imagine that experience would feel. It's so cleverly thought out, but so subtly done so. It's just really, really clever, it's really nice, and clearly this is a writer who knows their craft, who puts a lot of thought into these things. And it has that sort of ebb and flow of people's actual lives as well. It very much has that feeling. When there's a lot happening very quickly, you feel it. When things slow down, you feel it. Very, very clever pacing in this book. Talking of something else that's incredibly clever, is how much world building and how much lore there is in this. Because it's a contemporary setting, I think it's implied to be early, maybe mid 2000s at the absolute latest, something like that. So you wouldn't necessarily think there would be a whole ton of world building and all of that in there. But there is. I mean, for 100 pages, it's amazing how much is packed into here. There's a lot of folklore feeling, which is where you get that sort of folksy, almost folk horror feeling at points, which is fun. I like that. You also get a lot of Christian legend coming through as well, and this sort of interaction between those two things I think is really fun, and especially against the backdrop it's set on as well. And I'm not going to go into too much detail on that because I do think it nudges into spoiler territory. The way that all of these sorts of things come together and are combined is very, very clever, and it makes things that are, if you're a Brit like me, and a lot of these things individually can feel quite standard, quite stock, kind of, oh okay, we're just sort of putting this in a story again. It's a really fresh take on all of those things, and putting them all together in a way that makes a lot of sense, but I'd be surprised if you'd seen it come together like this before. I think with any psychological horror, you would expect a main theme to be mental health, and that's, I would say, higher in this than most other psych horrors I've read and experienced. Mental health is a huge, huge, huge factor in this one, and how it's played is, again, really clever, and it does really make you question what you're reading. And I mean, it's not quite aberration in the sense of I genuinely feel like I'm going insane reading this book, but it's not a million miles off, and if it was the same length as aberration, you'd definitely get that same feeling. There's also two other huge themes in there, one of which is historical oppression, which I always think is interesting to tackle. I mean, it's me. Are you surprised by this? The person who likes hisfic and politics and all of that is interested in this. Taking oppression and putting that through a historical lens and how that sort of bled through into the everyday and the lasting consequences of that. This is something that to me is always really interesting to write and read about. And seeing it done with something like a psych horror is again something that feels quite unique and quite interesting. This was really fun to read about, and the sort of tie into the family theme as well. How all these things come together is really fun, and how dysfunctional and broken up family can be as well, because I don't know, I increasingly do quite like stories like that because I think it's something that's a lot more common than a lot of people realise. So seeing how all that can happen and how messy that can be and how easily that can come about in something like this, despite the circumstances that come up, it still feels incredibly naturalistic. It's something that's very naturalistic, very commonplace, very grounded, that is at a point in the story that is anything but, and again, that contrast is nice. I think this is something that I just like about psych horror in general, that you get stuff happening that is so out there and so crazy, but you have these grounding moments, these grounding points that make it feel real and close to home, and the sort of juxtaposition there is always just so much fun for me, and it's done so well here. One thing I was going to talk about in more detail with this was structure. I think I did get a little bit ahead of myself on this one, but the sort of general non-linear kind of structure that you have going on here, it's done nicely here. It's something that it seems like a lot of writers are trying to do lately. I've seen a lot of books pitched on Goodreads lists that are, it tells the story of 3 generations and all of these sorts of things, but it's something that I think is rarely done very well. Whereas this sort of jump back, jump forward, it's done at quite natural points, I think is the thing. It's looking back over a life for a lot of it, but where you jump forward is almost where there are a few years that bear less bearing. It's a very natural way of handling this sort of thing. I don't know, it's the effortless naturalism of all of this I really like, and something that I haven't really seen much in anything that I've read that I really picked up on here was the sort of spelling and punctuation. Bear with me on this one, bear with me, because I know there are a lot of really insufferable discussions about this. But it's really clever how it's done in this book. There are some alternate spellings used contextually that are just very clever because it gives, you know what it's saying, but you also know what it isn't saying. Like there's a whole other connotation that's brought in. It's a very clever piece of craft that's done a good few times in the book as well. And some slightly odd word choices that do the same thing. This isn't something I've really seen before. So seeing that, and especially in psychological horror, again, it's just every little detail has been really thought about here. And there's so much to be said for that, especially in a genre like this. I think it does add a bit to that sort of slightly folktale feeling to it when you get all of these double meanings of phrases and words. It makes you question things more. And with some of the weirdnesses and the exact situation that Stevie is in for a decent chunk of the book, it really does make you question exactly what's happening, even within the prose itself. Is this book actually telling me what really happened, or isn't it? And if I went back and reread it, I think it would read differently, and I think there would be moments where I'd say, actually, I don't think this is necessarily what actually happened here, especially given we're going through a pretty unreliable at points narrator and his memories. It's reasonable to take a pinch of salt there and think, not quite sure that this is exactly how it lined up. And that sort of grounded folktale feel, that's really fun. I really, really like that. I could talk about a lot of favourite moments. I really could, but it's when you have a book this short and this dense, I think especially in something like psych horror, it's really hard to talk about a lot of that stuff without spoilers. I do have a few though. So there are some conversations with a therapist in this one, and the way all of that feels a bit like a sort of chess match. I mean, I'm gonna love that. I mean, those sorts of moments can be very character building and introspective and interesting regardless, but having that chess match feel in there on top really elevates that, and you really learn a lot about... Honestly, you probably learn more about Stevie in those moments than at any other point in the book. And the ending sequence as well is just really, really solid. I really can't say anything much about that, other than there is one particular moment in that ending sequence that's so visceral and so visual that, like, it's one of those moments that I can really see myself drawing as well. It's one of those, as is the opening. The opening has that same feel. It's one of the strongest openings I've read in a while. This is one of those where if you have thought about reading horror or psych horror, and you're not quite sure whether it's the sort of genre for you, this is a really good book to read, because not only is it a really good psych horror, but it's a short one as well, so you don't have to commit to something that's really long, or just longer in general, and then think, actually, this isn't really the thing for me. And that's where it kind of has one up over Aberration, because Aberration's like 270 pages or something like that. So, I mean, Aberration is like the one horror novel I would say that basically anyone should read. But if you're really not one for horror or psych horror, maybe start with this one. It's also genuinely just worth reading if you want to see some great craftsmanship, and you want to see how a non-linear timeline can be done really well, and just little things around the details of things like pacing, things like really clever little word choices and things like that, and how to just pack a lot into a small space. Like, this book is one of those, if you're a writer, this one is worth studying to like really see how all this stuff works, because it's genuinely fascinating to see how much is packed into a really, really small space. I mean, I don't think it's a surprise to anyone that this is a 5-star read. I mean, this is going to be top 3 for book of the year for sure. Yeah, I've read 5 books so far this year. It's not very many. It's March when I'm recording this. So yeah, there's a long way to go, but sometimes you just read one and you know. It's a bit like reading You Will Speak for the Dead at about this point last year, and just knowing, oh yeah, this is going to be one of the best of the year. It's that same sort of vibe. And the books I put it in the same company as are, Aberration, You Will Speak for the Dead, things like that. That's how good this book is. If you've read either of those, you know how excellent those are. Read this. This is amazing. Link in the description to get it. And if you are a fellow writer and you have an ARC that you would like me to read, there's a full cheat sheet at the end of the video. It's not fully comprehensive, just to warn you, so you might want to find a video on my channel where that is comprehensive, it's time-stamped and everything. There's a link to that and the form in the description. Short book, short episode, I guess, on this one. And until next time, have a wonderful rest of your day, and happy reading.